outside the original Constitution of the United States and outside of the best interests of American citizens. A sobering study of the signed treaties and charters between Britain and the United States exposes a shocking truth. The United States has always been, and still is, a British Crown colony. King James I was famous not for just changing the Bible into the King James Version, but for signing the First Charter of Virginia in 1606. That charter granted America's British forefathers a license to settle and colonize America. The charter also guaranteed that future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all the citizens and colonized land in America stolen from the Indians. After America declared its independence from Great Britain, the Treaty of 1783 was signed. That treaty specifically identifies the King of England as the Prince of the United States and contradicts the belief that America won the War of Independence. Although King George III of England gave up most of his claims over his American colonies, he kept his right to continue receiving payment for his business venture of colonizing America. If America had really won the War of Independence, they would never have agreed to pay debts and reparations to the King of England. When Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the U.S. President was made subservient to the King of England. The 13th Amendment is called the Title of Nobility Amendment and forbids U.S. presidents and their officials from using royal titles like king or prince or baron. For some mysterious reason, the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1810, no longer appears on current copies of the Constitution. America's blood-soaked War of Independence against the British bankrupted America and turned its citizens into permanent debt slaves of the king. In the War of 1812, the British torched and burned to the ground the White House and all U.S. government buildings and destroyed ratification records of the U.S. Constitution. 1 century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg's Federal Reserve Act in 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of America's economy to the Rothschild banksters.
In 1913, the Rothschild KM was able to establish a beachhead by bribing crooked, treasonous members of Congress to pass the illegal, unconstitutional Federal Reserve Act on Christmas Eve without a required quorum. The act was then signed by crooked, bought-off President Woodrow Wilson, number 28, who was a traitor to America, like the members of Congress who voted for it. And look, I found pictures of Woodrow Wilson. Look at the handshake. Look at the handshake. That's a Masonic handshake. That's not a normal handshake. Look, he's giving the guy practically his wrist. These are Masonic handshakes. He's a bought man. Wilson was a bought man. The KM put an illegal, unconstitutional tax system in place in order to make sure that Americans would have to pay for their high-level USG spending, approved by a bought-off, crooked Congress and presidential puppets put into place by corrupt KM campaign finance. It's easy for the KM to garner enough money to elect anyone they want, because when you control a bank that is a secret major counterfeiter, you have all the money made for you that you desire. Absolute corruption corrupts. Absolutely. Doesn't it, though? Just look at Rome.
Most Americans still believe that the Fed, or Federal Reserve, is the government. It is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose majority Class A shareholders are the Rothschilds, Warburgs, Kuhn and Loeb, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Israel Seif, and the Lehman Brothers. This private banking cartel is the Fed and is never audited and never pays taxes. They print and design America's money, which displays their symbols of an Egyptian pyramid, a Masonic all-seeing eye, and the words, "In God We Trust."
At about the same time that they created their illegal usury tax system in America, they also bribed members of Congress to approve the Internal Revenue Service, 1862, which is their private collection agency incorporated in Puerto Rico. And I'm going to show you something here with this little chart. Soon afterwards, they set up the Federal Bureau of Investigation to protect their banksters, to serve their cover-up needs and prevent them from ever being prosecuted for their child sacrifice rituals or pedophile networks, and to also serve as a covert intelligence operation on their behalf. So what we have Babylonian money magic. Here we have the collection agency is established, 1862. Got to pay for the war. Got to pay for the war, folks. Got to pay for the war. And if we don't pay for the war, those Brits, they're going to come and get you. They're going to come and get you. Right? Do you see a theme happening? Then they established the Department of Justice. Yes, in 1908, Bonaparte establishes the FBI. Bonaparte was bought off, just like Napoleon was bought off. And this is going to be the enforcement agency that will guard their crimes that they make with the United States Federal Reserve System. So the FBI was not set up to protect you and to bring about justice. It's a criminal justice system. It is justice for the criminals. So the Department of Justice was established to guard the crimes of the KM within the system, within the government. It had nothing to do with guarding you and helping you and protecting you. Nothing. Nothing. In fact, these agencies, note that the FBI, BATF, that's Tobacco and Firearms, IRS, and others have no official charter according to the Library of Congress, and so have no right to exist or issue paychecks. You're under control. You're being used and pushed around. It is not about your betterment. It is not about your having a nicer, more protected, better life. It is about covering over their crimes and continuing with their crimes to hunt you. That's what it's about.
Most U.S. citizens believe that the United States is a country and that the president is the most powerful man on earth. The United States is not a country. It is a corporation, and the president is president of the corporation of the United States. He and his elected officials work for the corporation, not for the American people. Since the United States is a corporation, who owns the corporation of the United States? Like Canada and Australia, whose leaders are prime ministers of the Queen, and whose land is called Crown Land, the United States is just another crown colony. Crown colonies are controlled by the empire of 3 city-states. At the center of each city-state is a towering, phallic-shaped stone monument called an obelisk that points skyward. In D.C. city-state, the obelisk, known as the Washington Monument, was dedicated to Freemason George Washington by the Freemason Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia. The secretive Brotherhood of Freemasons laid the Washington obelisk's cornerstone in 1848 and contributed 22 Masonic memorial stones. 250 Masonic lodges financed the Washington Monument obelisk, including the Knights Templar Masonic Order. At the heart of London city-state is a 187-ton, 69-foot-tall Egyptian obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle. It was transported from Egypt and erected on the banks of the River Thames. In Vatican City, another Egyptian obelisk towers high above St. Peter's Square.